Natalee Holloway's mother found out for sure what she had always thought over 20 years after her daughter went missing in Aruba. Joran van der Sloot killed Natalee, and now he finally spoke the truth about what happened all those years ago. Natalee Holloway's name became a part of the memory of a generation, linked with pain, mystery, and unending hope in a case that made headlines for 20 years. But now, after decades of lying and not saying anything, the man who everyone thought was guilty has finally come clean. His terrifying statement, which is buried deep in court records, shows a truth that is much more disturbing than anyone thought. What happened to Natalee? The mystery has been solved, but the answer might break your heart. Stay with us as we reveal the whole awful truth. What happened to Natalee Holloway that night in 2005? For almost 20 years, the world has been holding on to the pieces of a terrible mystery: the May 2005 disappearance of 18-year-old Natalee Holloway in Aruba. Her case became one of the most talked about unsolved cases of the century. But now, a frightening confession from longtime suspect Joran van der Sloot has broken the quiet and revealed things that are even worse than most people thought. There is a big cinder block on the shore. I grabbed this and hit her in the head. The confession was included in the U.S. Attorney's sentencing memorandum in 2023 and came from a transcript of a recorded FBI interview. In this terrifying paper, Joran van der Sloot finally went into horrifying detail about how he killed Natalee. The confession wasn't part of a murder accusation, but it came with his guilty plea for wire fraud and extortion against Natalee's mother, Beth Holloway. He committed to tell the truth about what transpired that night as part of the plea arrangement. Van der Sloot said that after a night out at a bar in Oranjestad, Aruba, he and Natalee ended up alone on a beach. He said that was where he made an unwanted sexual advance. He got angry when Natalee fought back and hit him in the groin. He said he kicked her in the face hard enough to knock her out, or maybe even worse, she stopped moving totally, as he said. He observed a huge cinder brick laying on the sand just a few steps from her body. He didn't think twice before picking it up and hitting her in the head with it, killing her. According to the transcript, he said, "I smashed her head in completely." The detectives asked him to explain what kind of barrier it was. He pointed to the normal gray cinder blocks, which are also used in the structures nearby. What came next was just as bad. Van der Sloot said he dragged Natalee's body down to the ocean after she died on the beach. That night, the seas were calm. He stepped into the surf until it was up to his knees and pushed her body out into the black water, thinking the tide would take her away. He added that after that, he strolled home as nothing had happened. This terrifying revelation was not only specific, but it also fit with things that had been rumored for a long time. The FBI gave him a polygraph exam to be sure it wasn't just another one of his many falsehoods. He passed. He was finally telling the truth according to the Bureau's rule. Federal prosecutors, such as Assistant U.S. Attorney Lloyd People, agreed that this confession was very important. People said that was the closest approach we'll ever get to knowing what happened to Natalee. Investigators even went back to the Aruban coast to compare the setting Van der Sloot described to the real thing in order to back up some of his claims. Still, one question keeps coming up in the case, even after this unexpected news. What happened to Natalee Holloway's body? How did one confession, hidden for 18 years, disclose something worse than everyone thought? Stay with us to find out. The lies, the tricks, and the long path to a terrifying confession. The name Joran van der Sloot got all the attention right away after Natalee Holloway went missing on May 30. The 18-year-old from Mountain Brook, Alabama, was in Aruba with her classmates to celebrate their graduation. That night, she was last seen leaving a prominent nightclub with Van der Sloot, who was only 17 at the time. She never got back to her hotel. What happened next would turn out to be one of the most confusing and terrible instances that have not been solved in a long time. Van der Sloot's account started to change almost right away. First, he said that he and two friends had securely dropped Natalee off at her hotel. Then, for no reason, he changed his story and said he had left her alone on the beach. As the media got more interested and the authorities pushed for answers, these inconsistencies raised red flags. But even though the public was very interested, there were many searches over the island and many interrogations. No solid evidence was found. No body, no witness, and no confession. Van der Sloot was in the public eye for many years after that. He seemed to like the attention, if anything. He did interviews, disclosed information, and made big assertions that he eventually took back. In 2008, Dutch criminal reporter Peter de Vries secretly filmed him in a car, and it seemed like he was admitting that Natalee had died while they were together and that he had gotten rid of her body. But when asked, van der Sloot said he didn't do anything. He said the recording was a setup, and that he had manufactured the performance to impress someone he thought was involved in drugs. This kind of attitude became his signature. At one point, he gave responses. Then he pulled them back, using the truth like a weapon. In 2010, he got even more deceptive when he called Natalee's mother, Beth Holloway, with a harsh proposition. He would tell them where Natalee's body was for $250,000. After getting a $25,000 advance, he took her legal team to a building site that turned out to be a dead end. That act, which was an attempt to extort money while giving false hope, led to federal prosecution in the U.S. But the true turning point didn't happen until October 2023, almost 20 years after Natalee went missing. He was sent back to the U.S. from Peru, where he was already serving time for killing another woman. Van der Sloot made a bargain with U.S. prosecutors. He told the FBI everything this time. It was different from the lies he had spoken before. In his signed statement, he said he tried to sexually assault Natalee. When she fought back, he hit her hard, knocking her out, and then used a nearby cinder block to kill her. He later pulled her body into the sea. This wasn't simply another tale, it was a sworn statement that was backed up by a polygraph test and taken seriously by the authorities. There was something concrete and final for the first time. He stated it in a cold, planned way, with no sign of sorrow. This showed that he was not just a killer, but also a manipulator who had kept the truth like a trophy. He deceived for almost 20 years, but why tell the truth now, and in such scary detail? Stay put. The arrests, the changing stories, and a quest that never stopped. Just a few days after Natalee Holloway went missing on her high school graduation vacation to Aruba, local police made their first big move on June 5. Nick John and Abraham Jones, two former security guards, were arrested on suspicion of murder and kidnapping. The two had worked at the Allegro Hotel, which is currently closed for renovations. Authorities never fully explained why they were arrested, but there were rumors that confessions from Joran van der Sloot and the Kalpo brothers had pointed the finger at them. The media speculated more, pointing out that the two guys were known for hanging around at hotels to meet women and that at least one of them had been in trouble with the law before. But the proof wasn't strong enough. The men were let go on June 13 after spending more than a week in jail. They were never charged and were never definitely linked to the crime. On June 9, just days before the guards were let go, Joran van der Sloot and his associates Deepak and Satish Kalpo were taken into custody. Deputy Police Chief Gerald Dompig thought of them as the main suspects in the case from the very beginning. 3 days after Natalee was reported missing, phone records were taken, emails were watched, and monitoring started. But Dompig subsequently said something that worried him. Natalee's family had put them under a lot of pressure. He indicated that the arrests happened before they had enough strong proof. 2 days later, things were even more confusing. On June 11, a government official mistakenly said that Natalee was dead and that they knew where her body was. That allegation was taken back hours later. Dompig issued a more vague update that same night. One of the suspects said that something awful happened after they took Natalee to the beach. The next day, meanwhile, prosecutors didn't say anything to confirm, simply that the probe was at a vital point. There were more arrests. One of the suspects named a local DJ named Steve Gregory Kroes on June 17, and he was arrested. Joran's father, Paulus van der Sloot, was also questioned just a few days later, on June 22. On June 26, both of them were let go. In the meantime, the accounts from Joran and the Kalpo brothers started to fall apart, with each one being more incomprehensible than the last. At first, everyone said they had dropped Natalee off at the beach near the Marriott Hotel. Joran changed his story several times. At one point, he said he left her there alone, and at another point, he said she was with the Kalpos when he got home. The police completely turned down the second version. Dompig thought the narrative about the seashore was the most accurate. The investigation went on though because there was no body, no physical proof, and a lot of stories that kept shifting. Even with the best tools, it didn't help. On July 4, Dutch Air Force F-16 planes flew over Aruba and used infrared sensors to find changes in the ground. They didn't find anything. Not then, and not in the months that came after. She disappeared without a trace. But what really happened on that beat? The harsh truth that Joran ultimately admitted will shock you. What we know and what we don't know. Natalee Holloway, who was 18 years old, went missing on the last night of her graduation vacation to Aruba in May. For years her family and friends, as well as the rest of the world, were troubled by her disappearance. There were a lot of rumors, and investigations went on for a long time, but the truth kept hidden. Until 2023 when Joran van der Sloot, the man at the core of the mystery, finally spoke the truth about what happened. And what he said was much worse than everybody had thought it would be. This wasn't the first time van der Sloot had talked about that night, but it was the first time the police believed him. This 2023 admission was part of a formal plea deal, which was different from his earlier confessions. The contents confirmed what people had long suspected. His story matched the first ideas that detectives had about what happened, theories that had been drowned out by years of lies, fake interviews, and false leads. Natalee's parents lived in a painful limbo for almost 20 years. They didn't know what had happened to their daughter. No matter how crazy the new version of the narrative was, they followed every lead van der Sloot gave them. He even tried to sell Natalee's mother bogus information about her daughter's remains, asking for thousands of dollars for a place that didn't exist. His lies weren't just bad, they were a weapon used to hurt anyone who wanted to know the truth. Even after searching in landfills, ponds, beaches, and sand dunes over and over again, Natalee's body was never found. Divers searched the seas, cadaver dogs searched possible burial places, and cutting-edge equipment like infrared-equipped planes and satellite photography were used. The FBI looked at duct tape and strands of blonde hair. None of these things worked. Now that van der Sloot has confessed, things are starting to make more sense. But the most terrible fact may be that the ocean devoured all the proof a long time ago. He said that Natalee's body was placed in the ocean just a few hours after she died. Experts concur that the odds of recovery are limited after almost 20 years of tides, storms, and changing currents. This isn't merely a story about a horrible crime. It's a story of manipulation, of a young woman's life being taken in an instant, and of a family that struggled for the truth through decades of grief and lies. Even when the whole truth came out, it hurt to know it. In this case, justice might never look the way anyone wanted it to. What did people say following Natalee's horrible death, and how did her parents get over the pain? Stay with us to learn more. A mother's rage. A firestorm in the country. When something awful happened on the Caribbean island of Aruba, the world's attention instantly turned to the police there and to Beth Twitty, the mother who was crushed. There was more than just a criminal probe that came next. It turned into a very passionate and frequently bitter fight between parents who were grieving Aruban officials and the world media. From the very beginning, the Twitty family was quite critical of the Aruban authorities, saying they were slow to act and that important leads were overlooked, suspects were mismanaged, and there was a lack of openness. But Beth Twitty's conduct on the island also caused a lot of talk. Some people said she was selling a one-sided story. Some people said she told Natalee's classmates not to completely cooperate with the police, supposedly to keep any information that could make her daughter look bad from getting out. The Twittys refuted these charges, saying that their only goal was to find out the truth. Beth didn't hold back when she talked about suspicions. She openly named Joran van der Sloot and the Culpo brothers as the people she thought were involved in the disappearance of her daughter. After the Culpo brothers were let out of jail for a short time on July 5, she called them criminals and said they had committed a violent crime against Natalee. Hundreds of Arubans gathered outside the courthouse in Oranjestad that same day. They held up placards that said "Innocent until proven guilty," and "Respect our Dutch laws or go home." The outcry came quickly. Satish Culpo's lawyer said they will take Beth to court for what they said, which they called obscene and libellous. Beth later said sorry to the people of Aruba, and said that her statements stemmed from a lot of pain and anger. But Beth Twitty didn't give up. She wrote her book Loving Natalee in 2007. It is a genuine and heartfelt account of her struggle. That year she was also on Nancy Grace, when she said again that she thought Joran and the Culpos were to blame. She thought that if she gave up, Natalee's situation would be forgotten. Beth called the video disturbing and said it verified her fears when a Dutch TV show released hidden camera footage of van der Sloot, reportedly admitting to being involved. She even said that her daughter might have still been alive when Joran threw her body into the ocean. She said that Paulus van der Sloot, Joran's father, helped hide the crime.
The Holloway family changed their minds about tourism because they were angry about what they saw as problems with the system. Beth officially advocated for a boycott of Aruba and Dutch territory in September. At a press appearance on November 8, Alabama Governor Bob Riley stood next to her and told Americans to stay away from Aruba. Some governors and senators in the U.S. agreed with the call, but others did not. Led by Prime Minister Nelson Odubar, Aruban politicians fought back, calling the boycott foolish and reckless. In response, Aruba's tourism industry started a full-scale campaign to improve its image. They formed the Aruba Strategic Communications Task Force to talk on national TV and fight back against bad portrayals. But no matter what else was going on, like politics, protests, and the news, the pain of a mother looking for her daughter never went away. Was Natalee's mother unfairly depicted by the media? Whispers, anger, and headlines. Stay with us as the story unfolds. How the disappearance of Natalee Holloway captivated the world within days. What started as a very personal tragedy for one Alabama family turned into one of the most dramatic missing persons cases of the 21st century, thanks in large part to the media's unrelenting coverage. Natalee's face was everywhere in a matter of days. Her smile was on the covers of magazines, newspapers, and TV screens all over the United States. CNN, Fox News, Microsoft, and the National Broadcasting Corporation all covered the story almost non-stop. Anchors told her narrative with more and more urgency on morning shows and late-night broadcasts. Cable news stations turned the search for Natalee into a daily show with expert panels, breaking news updates, and live images from Aruba's beaches. The media loved everything about her disappearance. A young, pretty blonde high school graduate going on a fun trip to a beautiful Caribbean island, vanished without a trace. The media wouldn't let the audience look away. Natalee's mother, Beth Holloway, became the story's emotional center. She became a regular on TV, with a determined voice and pain in her eyes. She flew to Aruba right after her daughter was reported missing and promptly took charge of the story, talking to the press directly, asking for aid, and demanding answers from local officials. Her appearances on shows like The Today Show, Larry King Live, and Nancy Grace made the search for Natalee feel very personal. People all throughout the United States were drawn to the sadness and optimism that Beth brought to the show. But as the coverage got more intense, so did the problem. The media frenzy put pressure on Aruban detectives and made sure the case wasn't forgotten, but it also led to a lot of criticism. Journalists and media watchdogs started to say that Natalee's case was getting a lot more attention than typical missing persons cases, especially those involving people of color or victims from less wealthy families. During this time, the expression missing white woman syndrome became very popular. It showed how race, class, and looks affected which victims the media chose to focus on. The expanding media circus in Aruba generated problems. Initially, a lot of people on the island were sympathetic and thought the attention would help, but as days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, people got angry. Many citizens and officials thought that news coverage about the Aruban police made them look lethargic, disorganized, or even corrupt, which they thought was unfair and damaging. Tourism went down, and anger escalated. What started off as a humanitarian focus began to feel like an endless invasion. Joran van der Sloot, the last person to see Natalee, was catapulted into the public glare and depicted by numerous publications as the main suspect and media villain. He presented a new twist, confession, or denial with each interview. He brought the case back to life. Even if a lot of what he asserted couldn't be proven, it all made the news. He was a key player in both the inquiry and the show that surrounded it. The excitement of the case started to make it hard to tell the difference between fact and fiction, truth and ratings. The focus changed over time. The media began to pay more attention to the investigation than to the missing person. Even the slightest changes were called big updates. A fresh witness, a statement that was taken back, and a suspected tip-off. Anything could have brought cameras back to the island, and every time van der Sloot made the news again, whether it was because of more legal issues or another strange story, the media jumped on. When van der Sloot was arrested in Peru in 2010 for killing Stephanie Flores, the attention came back with full force. When he was sent back to the US in 2023, and ultimately admitted to killing Natalee, it all came flooding back. The case got a new life, and was once again in the news. The news media put out specials, retrospectives, and investigative films. True crime shows, podcasts, and streaming services spent hours going over every detail. Shows like Dateline NBC in 2020, a Netflix docuseries, told the story over and over again. They sought to put together what transpired in Aruba on that last night by using new interviews and old footage. But by then, the Holloway case was more than just a crime. It was a big deal in the news. It transformed the way stories about missing people were told. It brought up hard concerns about prejudice, ethics, and what the press should do. The news coverage helped maintain Natalee's name in the news. It made her mother's demands for justice louder and prompted the police to keep looking into the case. But it also showed how bad sensational journalism is, how quick people are to judge, how little responsibility there is, and how often pain is used to get ratings. At first it was a desperate hunt for a girl who had gone missing. Over time it became a tale that the media couldn't stop covering. And even years later, the hush never really came. Every time Joran van der Sloot made the news, whether it was for a new confession, another arrest, or a new legal action, the story of Natalee Holloway came back into the news. Her name still makes people feel things, still starts arguments, and still gets people talking all across the world. What happened in 2005 hasn't gone away, it still echoes through news cycles and people's memories. What kind of punishment do you believe Joran van der Sloot should have got? Please tell us what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to get more.